And for more on this unfolding story, we are joined by Professor Oscar van Heerden, Senior Researcher at the Center for African Diplomacy and Leadership at the University of Johannesburg. A very good morning to you, Prof. I want to start off with looking at the escalation between the United States, Iran and Israel, what this could possibly mean for South Africa. Is there any immediate threat to South Africa? And here also including South Africans. I know a lot of people have been looking at the fuel price. Is that a possible threat?
Good morning, Albert. No, absolutely. As long as the conflict drags on, it is bound to have a negative impact on the production of oil, the movement of oil and gas. As you know, large quantities of oil and gas comes through the Strait of Hormuz. The Iranian parliament has taken a decision that the strait should be closed. That in itself is going to invite a response from the US and others, but it is certainly going to have a very negative impact on the oil price, which then trickles down to the petrol price, food, and just generally for people all over the world, including in the United States, the cost of living is going to go up.
Yeah, and now we are waiting to see what a barrel of oil will be. Some even saying that it could go to around 130 US dollars. But let's go back to the politics of what is currently playing out. Looking at how South Africa has responded to the US strike, and I find it interesting also, Prof, that South Africa says that it was South Africa's sincerest hope that President Donald Trump would use his influence and that of the US government to prevail on the parties to pursue dialogue, a dialogue path in resolving the issues of dispute. Then you have the Iranian foreign minister saying that, well, we were discussing, there were discussions that were taking place, and then came the surprise attack from the United States specifically. What should we read into South Africa's characterization of what has taken place?
Well, what the South Africans indirectly is saying is that if indeed Trump and the Trump administration was interested in peace and in negotiations or the diplomatic option, they should have simply phoned Netanyahu and said, stop. You know, this is the interesting thing, that everyone is calling on Iran for de-escalation. Iran must do this. Iran must not have a weapon. But the truth of the matter is the aggressor in this particular conflict is Israel. Israel is the one who had decided on an unprovoked attack on a sovereign country on the 13th of June. Completely illegal. And, this is whilst, as the Iranians indicate, this is whilst the Iranians are in conversation, in talks, in negotiations with the USA. So when President Trump says they must return to diplomacy and to the talks, Iran is saying, we never left. You used us as a decoy to allow Israel to do a surprise attack and try to actually capitate our government, and it hasn't succeeded. So this is the scenario we find ourselves in at the moment.
Yeah, and part of that for me is also, yesterday there was the press briefing with the Defense Secretary of the United States, Pete Hegseth, as well as the Pentagon. And what was evident from what the Pentagon was saying is that these strikes were planned months ahead and weeks ahead of even before Israel attacked Iran. Then once again, isn't it for me it almost sounds as though, like, is it really a pure coincidence that all of this has happened all at once? Because the United States, as we had the conversation before, Prof, had said that the actions of June the 13th were unilateral by Israel.
Yes, this was just a way of trying to cover themselves in terms of diplomatically. But the truth of the matter is, you're absolutely right, Alden. I've been saying on a number of outlets that this is part of the US bigger plan. bigger strategic plan at play here. The United States has been part of this from the very beginning. They are trying to hoodwink the Iranians. They planned the surprise attack of the 13th of June with the Israelis because we know that Israel on its own would not have been able to fly that distance and deliver the payloads, etc. There was lots of planning. They needed to know where the various generals and the various scientists are at that particular time of the attack. So there's a lot of intelligence sharing. They needed to refuel on the way to Iran as well as on the way back. That is usually logistically provided by the United States. So this notion that Donald Trump and others are trying to create a sense that on the one hand, Israel operates on its own, and we are simply there trying to have a diplomatic solution, is a false thing. This plan is about regime change. Immediately after the bombings of the Iranian nuclear facilities, which again was illegal and against international law, because those were safeguards by the IAEA, Trump tweets that now it's time for regime change. So the language is beginning to change. We see that Netanyahu, as you said in your insert, language is changing. It's no longer the nuclear threat. It's now the nuclear and ballistic missiles threat. So they're constantly shifting the goalpost. And I suspect what's going to happen, the Iranians know that all-out war with the Americans are coming. There's no doubt about that. And so we are going to have to prepare ourselves for a very long, protracted conflict and war. And I think that, of course, there are a couple of options open to Iran, which they would have to explore.
Yeah, and what would those options be for Iran, also considering, once again, that the premise of this so-called preemptive strike and a threat to the U.S. was based on intelligence that, quite frankly, even with the United States' own intelligence community, seems to be disputed.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, because there was a plan. And Tulsi was not going to scupper that plan with truth and intelligence. No, I think here, the Iranians, this is a moment where the Iranians need to be thinking very strategically. They need to be clever about it. Of course, the knee-jerk would be to attack US bases around the region. I think that would be a mistake. The US claims that they are not going to get involved in a war unless provoked. In other words, they are saying to the world, we've done our bit. We set the nuclear program back with a couple of years, or at least that's what they think. And so that is it. Now, the Iranians are going to have to call their bluff. You saying that you're not going to get involved in a protracted war, fine, we won't attack your US bases. What will happen, one of the options is to continue the campaign of self-defense against Israel. In other words, continue with the salvos and so forth, the back and forth between Israel and Iran. That's one way. The second, as I said, is the closing of the Strait of Hormuz, which will be severe in terms of the global economy. They can withdraw from the Non-Proliferation Treaty. I think that the Iranians have been at pains to explain the complete bias of the IAEA in terms of its governing body constantly. There is no country in the world that has had this many inspections in terms of its nuclear facility. Information bound to be leaked by the board.
Yeah.
Scientists are known and so on. So Iran just simply don't trust the IAEA, because they feel that they have been betrayed by the DG. And then, of course, they don't trust Trump. Yep. Remember, they were a decoy when there was negotiations. When the B-2 bombers took off, there was again a decoy pretending that some are going to fly via Guam. And then thirdly, the Americans claim that they have now done their bit, and then soon afterwards they say regime change. So there's just no no diplomacy as far as Iran is concerned.
But with that said, Prof, on the one end, the United Nations Security General, as we just played the clip now, still speaks of the IAEA as a verifiable, would be able to come up with a verifiable solution, meaning that they still deem it as credible, whereas the chief of the IAEA had said that, Grossi, that Iran has repeatedly either not answered nor provided technically credible answers to the agency's questions.
Yeah, I don't want to defend the Iranians, but Mr. Grossi must also be truthful in the sense that that only happened towards the end of the period. I mean, it has been years of Iran cooperating with the IAEA. The fact that they were now enriching uranium to 60%, which is entirely done not because they want to have a weapon, but because they want to strengthen their negotiating position, because they knew that Trump was going to come and want to renegotiate since he tore up the last agreement of the Obama administration. As for Secretary General Guterres, unfortunately, Adrian, Aldred, there is no international rules-based order. There is no adherence to international law. There is no adherence to the UN Charter. We are now in an uncharted environment, uncharted waters, where we find ourselves very much in a realist world order, which is being upheld by the United States and Israel, which, by the way, says that the world is anarchic. There is no central authority that can manage that anarchy, and therefore it is entirely up to us as individual nation states to protect ourselves. This is the reality we find ourselves in now. And so the SG can say we're gravely concerned, we condemn. He's been saying the same about the genocide of the Palestinians in Gaza, and yet absolutely nothing comes from it. So he might want to talk about the credibility of the IAEA, but I think we all agree it is highly compromised. It has been very biased in the situation with Iran. One report towards the end of years of cooperation, and that justifies the bombing of Iran. I think that the Iranians are tired and that they are going to have to take some decisions about whether they remain the responsible nation state within the NPT when Israel, a nuclear power, is not a member of the NPT and has not subjected itself to any inspections.
All right. Thank you so much for your time. Professor Oscar van Heerden there, Senior Researcher at the Center for African Diplomacy and Leadership at the University of Johannesburg.